All right, so let's take a look here at the first game of the June 1991 LSAT exam. And it's a rare game, a circular sequencing game, but let's dive right in. It tells us that we have exactly 6 trade representatives negotiating a treaty. And these representatives are K, L, M, N, O, and P. So we have our variables, and we're placing these variables around a circular table. Right, so again, the chairs are numbered 1 through 6 with successive numbered chairs next to each other, and chair 1 next to chair 6, exactly like we have in our setup here. And each chair is occupied by exactly one of the representatives. So we have 6 representatives, 6 chairs. This is going to be 1-to-1. Every single representative is going to show up once and only once. All right, so now that we have our base, let's turn our attention to the conditions. Again, the following conditions are going to apply. The first condition tells us that P sits immediately next to N. So we know that P and N are going to be immediately next to each other. We don't know which order. Notice it could be Pn or Pn. Again, we don't know. Either is possible. All we know is that they must sit next to each other. Turning our attention to the second condition now tells us that L sits immediately next to M, N, or both. All right, so we know that L is going to sit next to M or N or both, which obviously in that case would mean that L is being sandwiched by M and N. Moving to the third condition tells us K does not sit immediately next to M. So K and M are not sitting next to each other. And then lastly, the fourth and final rule tells us that if O sits immediately next to P, then O does not sit immediately next to M. Contrapositive, if O sits next to M, it does not sit next to P. And that is all we know. And you should notice that we know nothing about the seat numbers. All we know is who is sitting next to who. Every single one of our conditions tells us nothing about the number of chair that any of these trade representatives are sitting in. It's only about who they're sitting next to. So for our purposes, we can erase the chair numbers and only focus on the conditions of who sits next to who, because any of these chairs could be any of the numbers. And that is the setup for this game.